Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, with you again today. Right, so what I'd like to share with you guys today is the energy of Uranus. And what I really want to focus on actually is when somebody has Uranus in their seventh house. It's a very, very tricky energy. And it's certainly very, very tricky when it's in the seventh house natally, and certainly even via transit as well. But before I talk about how it sort of shows up in the seventh house natally, I just want to share some main points about the Uranus energy and basically what it means. So Uranus is it's known as what's called the higher octave of Mercury. So Venus, for example, Venus's higher octave is Neptune, for instance. So some planets have a higher octave, and such as, you know, we've got Mars, and then it's Pluto. So it's a higher energy. Now, Uranus is really quite a fascinating energy and can be incredibly disruptive for a number of different reasons. Jeffrey Wolf Green makes a beautiful statement where he just says in his book, it's the energy that correlates with the freedom from the known, which basically means that our lives essentially are so conditioned in so many ways. And the conditioning of our lives, which, by the way, comes through past incarnations as well. So we bring in a load of conditioned memories that reside in the body, and more specifically connect to Uranus. So Uranus holds the long-term memory. It has all the memories contained within it from pretty much every single life you've lived. Jeffrey Wolf Green also talks about Uranus as being the planet that's associated to trauma for a number of different reasons. And there are very specific patterns or signatures in a chart that would define whether a person has brought in trauma from past lives that lies dormant within the person, within the soul, within the body. And then certainly various experiences in this incarnation can trigger those memories, and as a result the person can relive those traumas, as it were. Now, going back to the conditioning component of our life, which is when Uranus comes in, what it wants to do is it wants to smash out all those conditioned patterns and behaviors and memories and so forth. Saturn is what creates the boundaries in your life. So those boundaries form the various structures that you have in your life that relate to societal structures, to family structures, to the expectations that people have of you, and so forth. And those sorts of structures, which are conditions by Saturn, are essentially what can keep people really quite stuck, and stuck in certain patterns and behaviors that don't really enable the person to grow. So when Uranus comes in, it breaks through all of that, and it shatters all the structures, and essentially tries to liberate you. That's what Uranus wants to do. Freedom from the known basically means liberating you from the known conditions and structures that embody you and your life, both internally and externally. So Saturn is responsible for those structures of our reality that we experience on an external and internal level. And, you know, and it brings in past life conditions and conditioning that we pretty much hold in this space in our life currently. And, you know, that's another reason why when you look at Saturn in your chart, wherever he's located, you'll be sure to experience limitations and things of that nature, but also karma. You know, Saturn is one of the planets that's certainly associated with our karma and what we need to work on and what we need to work hard on, actually. So wherever Saturn is located in your chart, that's where you're going to experience some pretty difficult lessons, which is quite karmic, actually. Now, Uranus is the complete antithesis to Saturn. You know, they are the most opposing forces, really. So where Saturn tries to keep you together and keep you in its bounds, Uranus comes in and tries to smash those boundaries and free you and liberate you. But it's not an easy experience or an easy energy when Uranus comes in, because you see, even though Saturn is very limiting and defines a lot of our conditioned responses and behaviors and beliefs and so forth, it's also what creates that sense of security for people. So Saturn has a lot to do with security as much as it has to do with insecurity. But you know, most people like to feel that they're in control of their life, and those structures and those boundaries and those conditioned behaviors kind of give a bit of a false sense of security. They make one feel secure, but the fact is, on some level, none of us are really totally secure, because Uranus exists. And Uranus brings along the unexpected, the unpredictable, things that shock people out of their little comfort zone. So as much as it's a really exciting freedom type of energy, incredibly liberating, and essentially its purpose is to come in and decondition what Saturn has conditioned for you, most people have a lot of resistance to the impulse of Uranus, to that energy, especially people who are very earthy and who have a lot of Saturn aspects in their chart, very Saturnian type energy and so forth. Those people, I suspect, would be more inclined to resist the Uranian impulse and energy. So, but either way, you know, when you have Uranus in your seventh house, it's making a very big statement about, you know, the world of relationships for you. Before we go there, just a few more points about Uranus. So as I said, it's an energy that is trying to liberate you from the conditioned patterns in your life that you've created currently and from previous incarnations. And when Uranus comes in to shake things up, as it were, what it's really trying to do is it's trying to decondition you so that you can start to remember your essential self. It's going back to the essence of who you are pre-conditioning. See, the conditioned patterns and behaviors and conditions that we have in our life, they don't necessarily reflect our essential self. They reflect a conditioned self that is based on beliefs, rules, norms, you know, societal expectations, cultural components, expectations that people have of you. This is all coming to you from out there, as it were. And if you're a very Saturnian type person, then it's very real, and it feels impossible to break free of that. But this is the beauty of Uranus's energy when it comes in, you know, whether you're experiencing it through a transit or whether you have it strongly located in your birth chart. And certainly if it's in the seventh house, it's very strong because it's an angular house. The angular houses are incredibly powerful houses, and anything that's in an angular house has an extreme power and energy to it, and it'll show up, it'll come through, it'll play out in the person's life very, very strongly. So whatever planet Uranus is aspecting in your birth chart, that planet is going to be greatly impacted and influenced by the Uranian energy. So in a sense, what your chart is saying is that let's just say that you had Uranus aspecting your Venus or the Sun or Mars, very personal planets, or the Moon or Mercury, then there's something about that planetary energy that is going to be manifested and influenced through that Uranian energy. And so whatever Uranus touches, it essentially tries to decondition, destructure, and revolutionize. It's a revolutionizing energy, which is, again, it's not easy, which is why most people tend to resist it. Even though the prospect of being free and liberated can feel quite exciting, it also means stepping beyond the boundaries of Saturn. And Saturn, as I said, holds things together. It's kind of like the glue that keeps the structure and everything together in your life. So to break free of that and to step outside of that poses incredible insecurity to the consciousness of the person, which is why many actually resist the impulse of Uranus. So what I'd like to do actually is I'd like to read a couple of passages from one of Jeff's books. But before I do that, if you were born with Uranus in the 7th house, it's a very, very interesting energy, because it can really make you feel like the relationship world is very difficult for you, and very challenging to commit to a relationship or to find a person who's willing to commit. Now, there's a few reasons for that, because any planets in the 7th house are naturally going to be projected onto the other person. And in this case, we're talking about one-on-one personal relationships. So if you have Uranus in the 7th house, it's very typical for you to project that energy onto other people. And what does that mean? That basically means that you can attract people who are really detached, who are really erratic, who struggle to commit, who are very rebellious, who shock you in their behavior. And you're left wondering, what's going on with me? Why am I attracting these sort of people? Why am I, really finding it very difficult to attract a person that I can actually have a relationship with? And the reason for that is because the energy of Uranus it's your energy, essentially. It's inherently your energy, but because of the location of the 7th house and it gets projected onto other people, then naturally you're going to experience that Uranian energy through the others that you interact and engage with on that one-on-one personal level. So it's really about finding a way to integrate that energy into your own self and embodying that Uranus energy so that you essentially stop projecting it onto other people. That's not an easy thing to do. I'm not saying that by hearing this, if you do have Uranus in the 7th house, that you suddenly can say to yourself, oh, okay, so that's what I've been doing and this is what I now need to do. It's a process, and Uranus is also the process of individuation as well. So there's a lot of awakening to be taken place wherever Uranus is. When you have Uranus in the 7th house, at times it might be you that comes across as really detached and really aloof, and you may come across as a person who's not interested in serious commitment, or you're too erratic, or you're all over the shop, or you're just too weird. Or you attract really weird people. That's not unusual. And Uranus is a planet that's often associated with gay relationships as well. So Mars, Uranus, Venus, Uranus contacts is very typical of gay lesbian relationships as well, because it's that energy that represents the unconventional way of operation. So if we're talking about Venus and Mars, then that's, you know, love, relationships, sexual energy, etc. So it's going to influence those planets a great deal. If you have Uranus in the 7th house, I dare say that you've attracted some pretty unusual people in your life, or you've had unusual relationships, or you've struggled to understand why it's difficult for a partner to commit, or why you struggle to commit. And all of that has got to do with projecting the Uranus onto other people and learning how not to do that, to integrate that Uranian energy. So that, and what do I mean by that? What I mean is this, that there's a component within you in the world of relationships when Uranus is in the 7th house. It's not that you can't commit to a relationship or to a partner. Of course you can, but that you need to feel a sense of freedom and liberation within those relationships, because the minute there's a sense of your freedom taken away, then you're going to bail. You're going to say, see you later. And equally, if you're projecting that Uranus onto the other, and they feel that maybe you're suffocating them in some kind of way, or too demanding of them and wanting and expecting all these things from them, then they're going to bail on you, as it were. So it's a real balance, trying to balance that energy in a way where it's working on a positive level for you and in your relationships. Now, the other thing is that Jeffrey Wolf Graham says something really fascinating about Uranus in the 7th house, and I'd actually like to read that to you guys. So, as I said, Jeffrey Wolf Graham associates the planet Uranus with trauma, and in this case, it's mental trauma we're talking about. So, what he suggests is this. I'll read it to you. Mental trauma can occur to these individuals. This is a person with Uranus in the 7th house. When they experience sudden unexpected disruptions, fracturing or outright termination within their relationships, intimate and otherwise. This can occur by another or others projecting their own subconscious realities or dynamics upon these individuals, which is what I was talking about before, about this energy being projected either from one person, either from the person who has Uranus in the 7th house, or the people that they are attracting that's also projecting that energy onto them. The 7th house is classic projection experiences and energies. In both scenarios, this type of projection creates a high degree of irrationality into the complete effect of the relationship that can lead to psychological instability or trauma. In addition, these individuals have an intrinsic sense of fair play, of justice and equality. Those are the other very strong archetypal expressions of Uranus. That there has to be a sense of equality and fairness within the relationship for that person to feel that that Uranus energy is working in the way that it needs to work for them. When these intrinsic principles are consistently violated in a relationship, the cumulative stress can induce a psychologically traumatic state. When this occurs, these individuals must reevaluate themselves in terms of their expectations about reality in general and relationship dynamics specifically, which is what I was saying about learning how to integrate that Uranian energy into your own self so that it's functioning in a healthy way where you do feel a sense of liberation and freedom and your own individuality still exists in the relationship. So you're taking that Uranus and you're embodying it, you're embracing it, and you're working with it as opposed to projecting it and therefore it just coming straight back to you. And because these individuals will rebel against the feeling of being overly confined or enmeshed in a relationship, see the 7th and 8th house, when somebody has a lot of planets in the 7th and 8th house, they their lives are very much enmeshed in the life of others, in relationships. And that just doesn't include personal, intimate one-on-one. That can be family members and a number of other different people as well. In a relationship, they can create trauma for themselves and their partners when they begin to look for the exit sign. Many of these individuals will have subconscious memories of sudden loss within relationships that intensifies a core detachment from people in general and those that they are intimate with specifically. So what he's saying there is that because Uranus holds that long-term memory and memories of past life experiences, the implication is that there's been some kind of trauma perhaps in the past with very close, intimate one-on-one relationships, and where there's been sudden disruptions where the person has been left and things like that. That's created some kind of trauma in the memory body. And so the person in this life with Uranus in the 7th house holds that memory somewhere. So when they're subconsciously getting a sense of something like that playing out again in the current life, in a current relationship, they'll leave before they're left. So there's that sense of I don't want to experience that kind of trauma. And a lot of this it's not conscious thinking, it's not conscious decision making. It's acting through impulse and acting through the triggers of past life memories that create, certain fears and anxieties and trauma, essentially. This inner subconscious vibration can thus attract others who seem to be just as detached at a core level as they are. So person with Uranus in the 7th has a real detached nature about themselves when they are engaging with another on that intimate level or considering, developing a relationship with somebody. And the person that they've attracted is the same. They can be really detached as well. And it kind of leaves both people wondering, what's going on with them? Why can't they stabilize this relationship? Why can't they make it happen? Why can't they make it work, sort of thing? And then Jeff says here, this can create trauma for both people who are in this potential relationship, because neither will have the feeling of being totally connected to each other. That's because of all that detachment and aloof sort of behavior and perhaps acting erratic or perhaps being unpredictable or hard to pin down. That's Uranus energy. And then he just follows through with saying, if you have transiting Uranus to the 7th house, or if transiting Uranus forms stressful aspects to the planetary ruler of the 7th house, then these types of trauma can also be encountered for the person. So, Uranus it's that sudden, unexpected, electrifying sort of energy. So it's very exciting, but incredibly disruptive as well. It's disorder as opposed to order. Saturn is order, and Uranus is disorder. It destabilizes because it needs to break that heavy Saturnian ground and structure that we all basically have in our lives in one way or another. And it's very rebellious type of energy as well. So, with someone Uranus in the 7th house, they can be quite rebellious in their approach, or they can attract people who are quite rebellious as well. And I think the thing with people who have Uranus, in the 7th house, it's what I said earlier about needing to learn to integrate that energy into your own individuation process rather than project it onto those around you. And it's also understanding that when you have Uranus in the 7th house, it's going to be more effective when you can approach and understand that the world of relationships has a different edge for you, you know. Um, Uranus is the unconventional. So um, even though nowadays it's very common for couples not to live together, you know, many years ago that wasn't a common factor in people's lives. Um, Nowadays, so a lot of couples, you know, live separately and they have specific arrangements that suit them um, for those sorts of reasons. I remember years and years ago meeting a girl at the gym that I used to train at, and she was married, and she was quite a conservative kind of individual. So I was very shocked when she said to me that her and her husband have separate bedrooms. This was years and years and years ago when I was really quite young. And I was thinking to myself, gee, that's pretty weird. That's pretty unusual. Um, and anyway, I never thought anything too much after that. But it just reminded me now of, you know, that's one way sometimes Uranus in the seventh house can manifest. And there's all sorts of reasons why people might have separate bedrooms, even though they're married or they're in a, you know, committed relationship and so forth. People have snoring problems. You know, snoring is a big issue. That can be so incredibly disruptive for the person who doesn't snore. They basically don't get any sleep. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons why people would, you know, have different sleeping areas. But getting back to the Uranus energy, sometimes it's just about thinking about different, doing things differently in how you want to create your relationships, and obviously attracting a partner who is of a similar type of view and sense about things as well, and you can get it working on that level. And I guess the opposite to that would be if you've got Uranus in the seventh house and you are deeply attracted to a person who's very Saturnian, you know, who's very traditional and very conventional. Well, that's not going to work. That's going to create all sorts of issues and heartache potentially. So approaching things differently in the world of relationships is one of the key components to Uranus in the seventh house, and owning that energy, embracing it, integrating it through your own individuation process, essentially. But look, it's not easy. I think any of the outer planets, in fact, in the seventh house are extremely challenging, very, very difficult, and all for various reasons and very different reasons. But today we're talking about Uranus. So, you know, I just wanted to finish up by saying Uranian energy is so it's so out of this world, really. But it is the energy that potentially sets people free and deconditions and liberates their consciousness and their existence. Because if we remain in the bounds of Saturn, then there's not a great deal of expansion or growth or individuation that takes place from that. It's necessary up to a point. Saturn is necessary up to a point, and what it facilitates in our development and growth is necessary up to a point, but it can only go up to a certain point, which is why Uranus then comes in and basically can take us to that next level. And don't forget that Uranus is all about our intuition and our right brain as well. So it's about activating that high level of consciousness and understanding and intuition, and coming from a more authentic component of our essential self, as opposed to the conditioned self or the left brain, which is the Mercury world of ideas and right and wrong and etc. That's also very limiting. So we do need to access that right brain, which is Uranus. Not easy to do, but if we've got a strong Uranus signature in our chart, then that's part of our journey this lifetime. And if you've got Uranus in the seventh house, then a huge component to your journey this lifetime is to experience Uranus in the world of relationships and learn how to work with that energy and integrate it and so forth. I just wanted to say that Julian Assange, I'm sure most of you would know who he is. He's actually an Australian person who he's a computer geek, freak, whatever you want to call him. Quite an intelligent person, actually, quite extraordinary in what he's done. And anyway, the whole WikiLeaks thing, you know, what he exposed and so forth, which has gotten him into house arrest, and he's been there for many, many years. And what I'm getting at is this: Uranus rules computers, and you know the whole technological world. And what he's done is he's used the technological world to expose things that you know needed to be exposed. And of course, the Saturn world, which is the law, not natural law, man-made law, comes in and doesn't like it when someone exposes truths or exposes things that are being hidden for whatever reason or purpose. So Julian Assange has Sun square Uranus. This is why I'm talking about him. He has a very strong Uranian energy in his expression, in his being, in why he's here and what he's here to do. And it's that Sun square Uranus that really describes what he's done, and just how eccentric and rebellious and different he is in his way. And you know, he has paid for it, and I think he's still there in the UK, in the confines of the embassy or whatever it is. But anyway, he's just a really good example of that Uranian energy that's really eccentric and out there and different, and basically sticks it up the world of Saturn, which is, you know, the classic rules and norms, and the false sort of systems and limiting systems and structures that hold a lot of people almost imprisoned to a certain degree. And that's the downside to Saturn. When Saturn takes over, it's a very suffocating kind of energy that keeps people very oppressed, you know. So Uranus type of people are here to liberate people from that oppression. You know, as I've said before, Saturn is oppression, depression, repression. I think there's one more, just forgotten it. And Uranus is the antithesis to that. It's total exhilaration, freedom, liberation, excitement, boundless, really, to a very large degree. And Saturn is boundaries. So two very opposing forces, and both are absolutely necessary for different reasons in this 3D reality and experience. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to emphasize that if somebody has a strong Uranus in their chart, they will be unusual. They might even be eccentric, depending on where